Will you call the roll, please, Ms. Valerie?
Okay. Tony Casada. Loretta Arthur.
Here.
Robin Hanger. Dennis Smith.
Here.
Michael Meyer.
Here. No, I just got an email or text from Tony. He's at the emergency room with his granddaughter. He will not be here. She has a broken arm, looks like.
Do you want to make a motion to excuse him then?
Yes, ma'am.
For that? Okay.
Well, I would entertain a motion to excuse Tony.
I'll make the motion to excuse Tony.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. That passes unanimously, Ms. Val, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry to hear about his granddaughter.
I sent him a text back. Maybe we'll learn something. All right. Please join me in the invocation. Lord, we just thank you that we can come here tonight and that we can do the work of the city. We pray that you will give us wisdom and guide us. And we pray all these things in your holy name. Amen. You're up.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Looks like we have two sets of minutes to approve from August 22nd and January the 9th. Boy, it's been a while since we've been here, hasn't it? Goodness gracious. All right. Have you all looked them over? You know, any
I have.
additions or we'll do them both at the same time?
Yep.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve.
Second it.
Motion to approve in a second. None. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Again, that motion passes, Ms. Val, unanimously.
He's in a, mic. Oh, there it is. Mine's working now.
Okay.
Barely.
All right. Mr. Walker, would you like to present the first agenda item for us?
Yes, Chairman. I was thinking maybe it would be easier if we could get an aerial of the property that we're talking about, just so that we can understand why we're talking about a front yard variance setback when it's functionally the side yard of the home. Let's see, can we go to,
Check, keep going a little.
yeah, to the actual aerial?
That's general. There we go.
Okay, there we are. Okay. So the top is north, and that's Flomet Street, and then to the left, west is Ridge Avenue. The actual address is 317 Flomet Street. And if you notice, the property is on a corner. So when you have a corner lot, what happens is the code says that the sides of a property that abut a street are considered the front yard or considered a front yard. So this particular property is considered to have two front yards and two side yards. There's no backyard. The actual property line is in blue, and so you can basically see that the property has a majority of their yard on the north, and on the west side, not very much. It's about 20 feet from the edge of the house to the property line. So what they're looking to do is put in a pool, an above-ground pool, as well as an enclosure and perhaps a 6-foot fence, extending the 6-foot fence south along the western property line. But in order to do that, they're supposed to be 30 feet from their property line. So they have two front yards. The west side on Ridge is really functionally the side yard of the property. And that's where they want to put their pool and their enclosure. Obviously, they can't be 30 feet from the property line. They would be in the middle of their house. So what they're requesting is a variance from the requirement that states that they need to be a minimum of 30 feet from a front property line. Just some background information on the property. It's part of the Rio Vista Section C plat. That plat was approved by the Holly Hill City Commission back on August 14th, 1925. The lot contains the home that was originally built in 1956. It's zoned R2. It has a low-density, single-family residential future land use. Again, as stated, it's considered to have two sides. The property owner on April 18th, 2023, applied for the front yard setback variance. In order to grant the request, the Board of Planning and Appeals, as well as the City Commission, has to find that the request meets the requirements of Section 82-317. And that provides approximately 6 criteria that the board looks at in determining whether or not the variance should be granted, or whether or not it would be appropriate to grant the variance. For example, one of the criteria is that special conditions and circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved as distinguished from the applicant himself or herself, and which are not applicable to other lands, structures, or buildings in the same zoning district. So in addressing that, we can see that the home on the property was built in 1959 on a 5,900 square foot corner lot. This occurred prior to the city even adopting its land development regulations in 1993. The minimum lot size in the R2 zoning district is 7,500 square feet. The lot's only 5,900 square feet, so it's more than 20% smaller than what the zoning district requires today. And that makes finding room for additional structures or accessories and swimming pools or a shed very difficult, because it's really an undersized lot. One of the other criteria is that the circumstances did not result from the actions of the applicant. In other words, the applicant didn't cause this problem. They didn't cause this issue. And again, this is part of a very old plat. The home was built, and this lot was developed long before our zoning regulations came into play. So the other criteria are listed in your staff report. It's staff's opinion that the applicant has met all of the criteria as stated in order to grant the requested variance. And so the recommendation is to approve a front yard setback variance from the requirements of Section 114-765, which is titled Schedule of Dimensional Requirements, from 30 feet to 0 feet on the west property line to allow the construction of an up to 300 square foot pool and an enclosure and 6-foot fence at the home located on the southeast corner of Ridge Avenue and Flomet Street, and more particularly known as 317 Flomet Street. So just to clarify, if the variance goes from 30 feet to 0, it allows them to put the pool and the enclosure on that property line. But there's between 40, one measurement shows 40 feet, the survey shows 50, so I'm going to trust that the surveyor survey, it's 50 feet of basically grass that you see from the road's edge all the way to their property line. So there's in effect a 50-foot buffer already there. There's city infrastructure there, and that's why we can't simply let them dig in that area or let them vacate some of that right-of-way and add it to their property. So there's a pretty good buffer there. So they're really asking to put the pool and the enclosure right on that property line. And that's what staff recommends the board approve.
Okay.
And that's the conclusion.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Is there anyone here who would like to speak to this? Would you like to speak for it or against it?
I would like to speak neither. I just have a
All
question.
all right, well then come up to the podium, tell us your name and where you are from.
Okay. My name is Mary Ann Trussell. I live directly across Ridge Avenue from the property.
Okay?
I have no problem with this variance being given. My question is, if a variance is given to one property, does that then allow other property owners to have a variance when they request it?
Any property is able to request a variance, but each variance is evaluated based on what Florida statutes contains and what the land regulations contain. So there's specific criteria that have to be met. And if they meet that criteria, and it presents a hardship, which in this case, the hardship would be that these folks can enjoy an above-ground pool. If it meets the criteria, then yes, they would be able to receive a variance as well.
Okay. That was my question, was, does this then set a precedent?
What it does is it says, criteria number 3 says, that granting the variance requested will not confer on the applicant any special privilege that is denied by this subpart to other lands, buildings, or structures in the same zoning district. So if they get it, then someone else could certainly ask to have it as well.
Okay. That was my question.
Yes,
And I
ma'am.
have no problem whatsoever
Okay.
with the request that we're here for this
All
evening.
righty. Well, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Heidi, would you like to come up and speak?
Hi there, I'm Heidi Heller, 460 Ridgewood Avenue. Thank you for having this meeting. Just a basic question. Even though there is a 6-foot fence already on the second front yard, the maximum height for section 114-721 says it shall, in all residential zoning districts, fences and walls located within a front yard shall not exceed a height of 4 feet.
4 feet.
So I just wanted to point that out. Also, it looks like the property itself has a 59-foot width and a 100-foot length. If you get a bigger aerial and you go further up, you can see that the total block from Flemish down to, I guess it's 13th or 15th, and the huge block above it. This is the easement on both sides that you're talking about when Ridge Wood used to be located on Ridge. So it's extra wide, as Mr. Walker pointed out. As the previous speaker said, that can other people do the same thing? Well, yes, they can. And I just want to let you imagine what would happen to that area and how it would look like with these stray buildings and 6-foot fences. I don't know for sure if I like it or don't, but I can just see a snowballing effect of making it look more like a alleyway than a residential area. That's it. Thank you.
You did, Ms. Heidi, you did hear Mr. Walker say that there's between 40 and 50 feet of land between the edge of the pavement and the structure, right?
Right,
So-
that's basically the easement or
No, ma'am, it's the
right-of-way.
That's the right-of-way. That Ridgewood was a 100-foot right-of-way when that plat was recorded. So
Right.
in 1925, I almost think that it had something to do with thinking US 1 was going to end up
Right.
being up there, because US 1 actually came along and cut through that plat at a skewed angle, which gives a surveyor a nightmare. Me being a surveyor, I'm well aware of that. So we deal with it all the time. I think this is a little bit different because it's the corner. We are talking about we're giving a relief for for a front.
Correct.
A corner in an R2. That's what we're speaking of. That doesn't, when you start going down the street, that's not the criteria anymore. Right?
Okay.
Because they only have to have one front till they get to the next corner, right?
All right.
And
I
the
hear
next
what you're
corner
saying.
to the
Sure.
north is in Ormond, or no, that's actually in Volusia County. It's not incorporated there. So we don't have to worry about that one.
Just didn't want to make sure, well, the 4-foot fence though, how about that?
I agree. I wondered about that myself, Mr. Walker.
Thank you.
How that 6-foot fence was, did we permit that?
I didn't find that went back a long time, and I wasn't able to find anything specific to the 6-foot fence and the permitting of it. I think that what happened was that looking at it, it looks like a side yard. And so whoever permitted it at the time may have just considered it to be a side
Side
yard.
yard,
And that's why they're asking now for the
Yes, sir.
variance, because it's functionally a side yard. Most people familiar with the area wouldn't consider that the front of the house, because they know on Flomich is really the front of the house. And so it being a corner is why it's being requested.
For full disclosure, I rode my untagged side-by-side and looked at it last night, yesterday afternoon. So I agree with you. But it was curiosity. Thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Heidi. Anyone else? All right. I would entertain a motion to approve the recommendation as the staff, well, I got to find it again, sorry.
I'll make a motion to approve as read.
As this, all right.
I'll second.
Okay, let's make sure we're clear on the motion. So the motion is to recommend approval of the front yard setback variance from the requirements of the section 114-765 schedule of dimensional requirements from 30 feet to 0 feet on the west property line only to allow the construction of an up to 300 square foot pool and an enclosure and 6-foot fence at the home located on the southeast corner of Ridge Avenue and Flomich Street, and more particularly known as 317 Flomich Street. Is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that's your second.
Yes.
Any other discussion? Call the question, please, Ms. Val.
Dennis Smith.
Yes.
Loretta Arthur.
Yes.
Mike Meyer.
Yes,
Passes 3.
motion's approved. There will come, are the folks here? So, Mr. Walker, when do they need to come sit before the commission?
They will come to the second commission meeting in June, which will be on the 27th,
Okay,
and that will be the
got
final
that?
meeting.
27th June, what time, Mr. Walker?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. Okay, Doug. Let's move on. Agenda item number 2. Are you ready, Mr. Walker?
Yes, sir.
All righty.
Can we get Exhibit D for this particular item, which is an aerial map? Thank you.
Do you know the page? What page is that? 250. Okey-dokey. I had that bookmarked on the one I couldn't get until I...
So this is the property that we're going to be discussing, and basically, it is a property that fronts on Nova Road, and it's in the vicinity of Old Kings Road and 13th Street. And currently, you'll see that there's a blue line that goes across the property. And what that does is it's separating the commercial piece on Nova Road with a residential area to the west. So the commercial area on Nova Road is currently zoned CC1, which is Commercial Corridor. And the residential piece is R7, which is considered a medium-density multifamily residential zoning. And what the applicant is looking to do is to do a future land use amendment on the residential portion, which is to the west, to a commercial future land use that would allow a very specific commercial activity. The piece on Nova Road is already has a commercial future land use and allows commercial activity. But a rezone would be done over the entire, both pieces, if you will, to a business plan unit development. So just to recap, you have a future land use amendment being done on the block on the west from basically residential to commercial, and then you have a rezone being done over both pieces. So the rezone would be going from R7 and CC1 to a business plan unit development. Now, the applicant is requesting the amendment and the rezone because they would like to develop a 3-story indoor climate-controlled storage facility on Nova Road. In back, which would be the portion that's currently residential, would be covered and uncovered vehicle, boat, and RV parking. So that would be in back of the facility. The overall project area consists now of a commercial parcel used as a parking lot on Nova Road. That's approximately 2.4 acres in size. And then, as you can see, there's a vacant wooded residential area, and that area is approximately 5.65 acres in size. The applicant has submitted renderings and a proposed signage plan. Now, the wooded residential area proposed for boat and RV storage, that's primarily surrounded by homes in unincorporated Volusia County. So those folks are all, they're Volusia County residents. And right now, it can be developed as an apartment community. So if the developer wanted to come in right now and put an apartment building there, they have the zoning in place and they have the future land use in place to do that. The developer is thinking that a storage facility or boat and RV storage would be a quieter use than an apartment community. And so that's part of their reasoning in requesting that in this area. The proposed BPUD, or plan unit development, will require that the indoor storage building on Nova Road obtain a certificate of occupancy prior to the boat and RV storage area in the rear, or when I say the rear, the west, being approved and open for use. However, both projects can be built simultaneously so that the developer is able to take advantage of economies of scale in developing the front and the rear at the same time. The comprehensive plan text, there's a comprehensive plan text amendment that is also being proposed. And what that would do is it would limit the commercial use on the parcels that are in the residential area. So once the residential area, the future land use goes from residential to commercial, what we don't want is for the Volusia County residents to be exposed to any kind of commercial, because there are types of commercial that make a lot of noise and that generate a lot of activity. So we're proposing a text amendment that would limit the type of commercial that can go there to vehicle, trailer, and outdoor covered storage uses limited to the traffic generation equivalent of 700 personal storage units. So that area would only be able to be storage for boats and RVs. There'd be covered storage, and the developer would need to buffer that area from the surrounding homes with vegetation and also a functional buffer. All of the access to it would be from Nova Road. So folks would have to, even to get to the back section, would come off of Nova Road. They would pass the larger 3-story storage facility on Nova Road and go to the back. So there wouldn't be any access along 13th Street or along Old Kings through any of the areas where the residential homes are. There is a site information list in your staff report. I won't go over every item. If you have a question, I'll be happy to address it. With regard to the surrounding zonings and future land uses, that is also included in your staff report in a sheet entitled Zoning and Land Use Table. And also a project analysis was done. One of the things that we have to do when we consider a change in land use is we look at what's being requested in terms of infrastructure impacts. So when we consider a change of land use, we do an analysis that compares the maximum development potential under each land use and the available capacity. So we say, if, for example, the residential area on the west, if we were to develop it now to its maximum potential as an apartment community, how much water would it use? How much sewage would it generate? How much solid waste would it generate? How many cars coming in and out would be generated, or traffic impacts? We look at those impacts, and then we say, if we were to change the land use to commercial with the limitation of only storage, what would it generate in terms of water and sewer and traffic and the general infrastructure impacts? And the applicant has supplied substantive and competent evidence to show that the impacts would be less as a storage facility in terms of the impacts. However, there are exhibits, Exhibit I and Exhibit J, titled Utility Impact Analysis and Traffic Impact Analysis, that do show how those numbers were arrived at. One of the things that we also look at is consistency with the comprehensive plan. So we look at the goals, the objectives, and the policies of the comprehensive plan in order to determine if the amendment and the future land use map is consistent with the comprehensive plan. The applicant addressed several of the items in the comprehensive plan, had a specific emphasis on certain policies. Those are listed in your staff report. And also did the same with regard to consistency with the urban sprawl rule. That is stated, the rules with regard to urban sprawl are listed in the Florida statutes. And the applicant addressed each one of the items in the Florida statute, provided a narrative, and that is in your staff report. And for the record, staff does agree with the narrative and the applicant's analysis of each topic with regard to policies in the comprehensive plan, as well as the rules with regard to urban sprawl found in Florida statutes. With regard to appropriateness of the requested zoning category, we review the appropriateness of the request to zone or rezone to BPUD. And the Board of Planning and Appeals, this board, as well as the City Commission, have to consider 8 specific criteria that are listed in Section 82-372 of the Land Development Regulations. The applicant did review the criteria. They did provide a narrative in the attachment Exhibit K in your staff report. And again, for the record, it's staff's opinion that the requested rezone from R7 to CC1 and CC1 to BPUD is justified and appropriate for the area. So that's a brief summary. I'll be happy to go into anything in detail if you would like. If not, staff is requesting approval for 2 different ordinances. One to address the future land use change with regard to the residential area to the west, and then one to address the rezone over the entire property. So staff recommends adoption of an ordinance of the City of Holly Hill, Florida, amending the comprehensive plan by amending the future land use map designation of certain properties totaling 5.19 acres listed and legally described in Exhibit L, which is titled Comprehensive Plan Properties, by virtue of a small-scale future land use map amendment, changing the future land use map designation from low-medium density residential to commercial, and to further limit the commercial activity on such parcels to mini warehouse storage, covered and uncovered vehicle, boat, and RV storage via a comprehensive plan text amendment, providing for conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing an effective date. and then a separate ordinance to address the overall rezone. Adopt the proposed ordinance enacting a rezone from CC1 Commercial Corridor District and R7 Medium Density Multifamily Residential to BPUD Business Plan Unit Development for parcels and the area legally described in Exhibit A titled Legal Description, together totaling approximately 8.05 acres. So that's my presentation, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Do you have any questions for Mr. Walker?
No, I'm good.
Mr. Dowse, are you going to make a presentation? Oh, Mr. Merrill, are you going to make a presentation?
A short one. Brian gave you a great one right there. I'll start by my name, Rob Merrill with Cobb Cole, 149 South Ridgewood, right down the street from here. I want to start by thanking you guys. I just realized you haven't had a meeting since January, so your presence here is very much appreciated, so we can get this moving to the next step. I've got a whole group of folks that have been working with us on our development team, with Brian and the city attorney and the city manager and all of the staff to get to this point. So, and thank you for both the presentation, Brian, and I think it's 200 and something pages of analysis that if you guys read all of that, God bless you. But there's a lot in there. I think that as Brian went through and hit the high spots, hit all the marks, the comprehensive plan, consistency, all of the criteria that we're here to make sure that we've checked off all the boxes on. But I'll kind of give you sort of a higher perspective, overview by telling you that I've done a lot of these self-storage facilities around the area of Volusia County and other counties surrounding. They really have become something a lot different than 20 years ago when it was orange roll-up doors that you saw when you drove down the road and not much else. We have modern architecture. These facilities look as nice as any office building that you'll see in the community. And Brian, of course, made sure of that, but the market has brought that. So people want to go to the self-storage place. They want it to be clean. They want it to be safe, well lit. Essentially, the way Brian described it, when you look at the yellow line there, the area that's being built is a compound, if you will. It ends up being entirely secure, 360 degrees with one way in and one way out. And so it's got a card gate, so you can't get in unless you're supposed to be there. So it's safe. It looks good. It's going to be buffered, as Brian said, around the entire perimeter on the residential side. And when you look at the impacts, I've had this conversation with lots of planning boards. It's essentially as quiet as a graveyard. Not a lot of people coming in and out of there. So when you look at it, a lot of people will put their stuff in, and they kind of forget about it for a long time, and that's just the way it works. Another sort of secondary effect that self-storage in a residential area like this has is it cleans up the neighborhoods, right? So all the boats that are in the side yard or the people's junk that's in their garage ends up having their motorcycles or their cars put inside, so it's not looking at the neighbor's bathroom window or kitchen window. So it cleans things up. It's a safe and secure environment. It looks good. As Brian mentioned in his report, and consistent with the comprehensive plan, which is of course one of the the things that you guys look at to make a decision like this, infill development. When you look at the overhead, it's pretty apparent. You're surrounded by development. This is an infill project, and we've talked about not having projects go out west of town. Well, at one point this probably was west of town, but now it's surrounded. It's sort of a hole in the donut. So from a standpoint of promoting infill, this defines it. I know you guys look at something like this and you think about the fact that it's very low impact. It looks nice, and it's pretty expensive to build these things. So from a standpoint of the economic impact, it's huge to the city. So tax base, something you guys think about as business people. I think that's pretty much it. Brian talked about sort of the comparison of what could be there under the existing zoning and comprehensive planning policies versus what we're proposing. I think that's an important consideration when you're making a change, right? This is really a change that's going in a direction of being less intense, which is kind of unusual in many cases. I'm glad you're showing the aerials, Brian, or the renderings, but you'll see that you got a whole package of them, and I didn't bring them to put up on the screen separately because you had so many in there. If you hit the one that kind of shows the perspective from Nova, that kind of gives you some of it. There you go. That kind of shows you when you're coming in from, aerial from Nova, what you're looking at. And, a lot of green area, beautiful architecture, fully secured. I guess that's all there is to say. If you guys have any questions for us, there's a whole team of people smarter than I am that can answer for you.
How many, so it's 700, is that including the spaces for the RV and boat, or what?
Yeah, so,
what's that?
so the 700 number is kind of an extrapolation from if you were using cubicle type uses, which you have really in this other building. So it's a mixture of indoor air-conditioned stuff that's of different sizes, and you guys can get into the details if you want to dissect it, but it's a mixture of uses from what would be considered a self-storage unit to, in this case, some of it open for boat and RV in the rear part. So it's apples and oranges as you look at those different types of ways that things are being stored. So does that help?
I was just curious how many spaces were in the
Oh, how many
back?
actual places? Well, so it depends on the size of the space. Mark, do you have any exact number on the, are you talking about the outdoor stuff in the back, right?
There's 841 cubicles in the front.
Yep.
And I don't actually have
I believe it's 118.
So 118.
Our boat and RV parking in the back.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, I'll sit down.
I have a question for you, Brian. Brian, I thought I read in there about a 5-foot buffer. Is that all the buffer that we're going to require on this PUD?
No, yes, I'll defer to
Mark,
the,
maybe you I think the numbers are between, in the 60-foot, go ahead, I'll let Mark give you the exact numbers. It's down to feet.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Mark Douth, 536 North Halifax, Mark Douth and Associates. Depends where you measure from. So if you measure from the north, if we're just looking at the back piece, the buffer is 60 feet 8 inches. So that would be on the very north side of the back piece. On the west side of the back piece, there's two different buffers because the property line jogs. The closest buffer is 29 feet 4 inches, and then at the place where it's wider, it's 65 feet 4 inches. And then on the south side, it would be 19 feet 8.5 inches.
And then it jogs over, it looks like, to, I'm sorry,
Yep.
to 35 feet 1 inch.
Yeah, so also on the south side, we have a property line jog as well, and where it jogs away, it's 35 feet 1 inch. So 19 feet 8.5 and 35 feet 1 inch. That's for the back piece.
Thank you, Mr. Dowse.
So the good news on that buffer is it's vegetated now. So
Right.
nobody's planting and waiting for something to grow before it
Right.
has the effect. It's immediate.
Scott, as you have often pointed out to us, that plan says that's what it is, but is our requirement, that was my question, is our requirement for only a 5-foot buffer with this,
no, our requirement for buffering residential and commercial would be at least 30 feet.
okay, thank you. I didn't read that. And Mr. Merrill, yes, I read all 262 pages. I wasn't thinking nice thoughts about you. I had other things to do. All right. Is there anyone else who would like to speak about this tonight? Yes, sir. Come up to the podium. Tell us who you are and where you're from.
My name's Steve Sweeney. I live at 1351 Old Kings Road. You've covered, I don't know if I need to direct to him or through you. They've covered a little bit of, I just have some questions about this.
Go ahead. Ask them and we'll see if we can get them answered.
So, me being on Old Kings Road, I would be behind the covered storage. You said that's a 30-foot buffer?
Yes, you would have at least, a 30-foot buffer is the minimum that we require, so it would be more than that.
And that property, what will be done with that property as far as the trees that are there be left?
Yes.
Will there be drainage and swales?
Preserve.
That's
Mark,
a,
I'll let you, you want to show the picture, then you
that's
can
a
show
really
exactly.
low area that floods right now with rain.
He can show you
So if
exactly.
you build up, it's going to flood my backyard.
Yeah, so basically in the back. So you'd be back here, correct?
I'm on the jut right here.
Okay. So the buffer, so you're on this road?
Yeah, Old Kings.
Okay. So basically, this is all going to be a retention pond. So all drainage will be directed to this pond. which then overflows into this system and out. So there shouldn't be any issues. And the buffer on that side, you had that question as well. So it's 35 feet right here to the pond,
Gotcha.
and then over there it was 19 feet, 3 inches.
Okay. And this is a fence.
That's a fence, correct.
Does it be block?
That's going to be a post and panel concrete system,
How high is it gonna be?
6 feet.
Okay. What about lighting?
Lighting will all be directed interior
I
of the
want my
site.
backyard look like a tennis court.
No, we wouldn't want it to look that way either. The lighting would all be directed interior.
All right, that's all I have.
That's all you have? Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming up and speaking with us. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? I would entertain a motion if someone from the board would like to make a motion. First, we could address the future land use.
I'll make a motion to approve as stated in the agenda,
As a staff recommendation.
as the staff recommended, yes.
I second it.
Is there any more discussion? So, Ms. Val, you got that? The motion is as the staff recommended
staff
for the future land
recommendation,
use.
yeah.
To motion for approval. All right. Have the motion and a second. No more discussion. Please call the question.
Loretta Arthur,
Yes.
Dennis Smith,
Yes.
Mike Meyer,
Yes,
passes 3-0.
the motion carries. All right. Now we'll need a motion for the rezoning of the entire parcel. One is going to change from commercial corridor, and the other is going to change from an R7 to the BPUD, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I make the motion to rezone it exactly as the report states.
As a staff recommended, all right?
Second?
Motion and second. Any discussion?
Sir.
All right. Call the question, please.
Dennis Smith,
Yes.
Loretta Arthur,
Yes.
Mike Meyer.
Yes, motion carries. So they come to the same meeting?
Yes, the first hearing for this before the city commission will be June 27th on Tuesday. It's a Tuesday at 6 o'clock. And then 2 weeks later will be second and final reading for the adoption.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Context of a small scale.
Mark, it's real nice seeing you.
Yes, I'll notify DMC and DEO after.
Should have had a
It's
basketball.
not transmitted, I'll have to wait.
All right. We're still having a meeting. If y'all would like to sit down or go, one or the other, be fine. Thank you. All right. The only old business that I know of is that you're working on giving the staff the ability to do a write-off on an administrative write-off on up to 10%?
I have not started that yet. Chair, I have,
It's real old news.
yeah.
You've had 5 months, for goodness sake.
Yeah, I know. I do think that that's something that, that will be looked at favorably. So,
Let's get it done. It'll make your life easier.
yeah, that's very true. That's very true. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, any other communications? Well, if anybody was to make a motion to adjourn,
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
all right, doesn't require any discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're out of here.